I'm going to pose a hypothetical that we don't often consider in crypto. What if Jay Powell is not in an ambiguously pagan secret society crypt somewhere with a cabal of global elites intent on maliciously dominating the world? What if FedNow is really just an improved payment system and not a stealth stepping stone to a CBDC? I'm going to argue that's still good for Cardano. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss CBDCs and FedNow taking a prominent position on the political stage and what that means for Cardano, our Nakamoto coefficient going up, some discussion on PFP NFTs, and a possible rumor related to Epic Games. If you feel like Jay Powell will be more into the eyes wide shut type secret society than the fire and stone carvings type, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. We've discussed before on this channel how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has launched a presidential campaign, and he seems to be very interested in crypto. That's all great. I think the more publicity, the more positive publicity, at least for crypto, the better. But it seems like a lot of the rhetoric he's going to be employing during this election cycle is going to be centered on the CBDC and FedNow issue. I'm calling it an issue, FedNow and CBDCs. You might disagree whether or not it's an issue. And I might even disagree about whether or not it's an issue based on some things we'll talk about in just a second. But what's obvious is that RFK Jr. and people like him are going to make CBDCs and FedNow a big talking point. And I think this is actually going to end up being good for crypto, whether it's a completely empty talking point or whether there's some substance to it. Here's what he posted. The claim that FedNow is not the first step toward a CBDC would be more easily digestible were we not aware of the Biden administration's steady barrage of hostile broadsides against cryptocurrencies. This is all pretty accurate from our crypto Cardano perspective. There has certainly been a steady barrage of hostile broadsides. Well put, RFK Jr. Between 08 and 22, the Fed partnered with a handful of big banks to print 10 trillion, 10 centuries of wealth in 15 years. A bonanza for the banksters. That's certainly consistent with what a lot of people in crypto, the way at least a lot of crypto people in crypto would characterize that. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin give the public an escape route from the splatter zone when this bubble invariably bursts. So the White House is colluding with the banksters to keep us all trapped in the bubble of profiteering and control. And then he talks about Nick Carter and his Pirate Wires post. Carter describes 15 incidents where President Biden has weaponized the FDIC, the OCC, and the DOJ to force crypto-friendly banks to close their doors to crypto firms since December 3rd. This is Operation Choke Point 2.0. I would agree. That is definitely happening. We should be wary since CBDCs are the ultimate mechanisms for social surveillance and control. As Balaji Srinivasan says, the distinction between FedNow and a CBDC is important from a technical standpoint, but not from a civil liberties standpoint. Balaji compares FedNow to a virus that has evolved to evade recognition by changing its sequence without really changing its function. I love Balaji, and I love his enthusiasm for crypto and the method he exudes. And I even like the way he's approaching it. The super crazy, hyper, I'm going to bet several $1,000,000 on something I know isn't going to actually happen kind of attitude. I like Balaji. And I like Nick Carter, even though I disagree with him on some issues, mainly related to his what we once would have described as his Bitcoin maximalism until he sort of seemed to become some kind of a VC that operated in the EVM space. So don't exactly know where he's at on that. But I do agree with a lot of things he says about Operation Choke Point 2.0. So here's the thing. This has become a big politicized talking point. The talking point is that the current administration is using FedNow as a stealthy way to sort of slide into a CBDC world where they're going to do all of the horrible authoritarian, surveillance state type things. They'll make your money disappear if your social credit score goes down. All the things that people are afraid are going to happen with a digital yuan controlled by the CCP. Of course, the opponents of the Biden administration are going to predict the same things for a CBDC under the Biden administration, and that the FedNow system is just sort of like this stealth way of easing everyone into that horrible, authoritarian, dark, dystopian surveillance world. That RFK Jr. tweet was from just today, but the Federal Reserve already knew it was definitely losing control of the narrative 3 days ago when it made this series of tweets, just sort of straight up denying everything that everyone's saying about FedNow and sort of denying what people are saying about a US CBDC. So this thread says, is FedNow replacing cash? Is it a central bank digital currency? FedNow is not related to a digital currency. FedNow is a payment service the Federal Reserve is making available for banks and credit unions to transfer cash. They've got this nice little infographic because they already know people respond to graphics and not to text. FedNow is not related to a digital currency. FedNow is a payment service. It is like other Federal Reserve payment services, such as FedWire and Fed ACH. The FedNow service is neither a form of currency nor a step toward eliminating any form of payment, including cash. So I think they probably just should have called this like ACH2 or ACH 2.0 or ACH Plus or anything like that. FedNow somehow has taken on this sinister, we're just moving you towards, CBDC surveillance, authoritarian, dystopian state. So FedNow service is neither a form of currency nor a step toward eliminating any form of payment, including cash. The FedNow service is an instant payment service provided by the Federal Reserve, launching in July. FedNow will be available to banks and credit unions. It will enable individuals and businesses to send instant payments through their depository institution accounts. Instant payments allow individuals and businesses to send and receive payments within seconds, any time of the day or any day of the year, so the receiver of a payment can use the funds almost instantly. The Federal Reserve has made no decision on issuing a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, and would not do so without clear support from Congress and the executive branch, ideally in the form of a specific authorizing law. A CBDC would not replace cash or other payment options. And then they give you some links to learn more about both FedNow and the CBDC. I think they really would have been a lot better off if they just would have said, hey, ACH is terrible. We know that. So we're going to give you ACH Plus or, HP ACH Speedy version, whatever they wanted to call it. Because really what it looks like, what they're signaling at least, is that this is just basically a better payment service, a better version of the same thing that ACH was meant to do. But this one actually works every day of the year, and the payment is going to get the person within seconds, which does, I'll admit, it does start to sound like crypto. I mean, this is something we've had in crypto since the very start. You can initiate a transaction at any time, and transactions on good blockchains go through within seconds, and they're very final, which is completely different than ACH. But because they called this FedNow, and people instantly started associating FedNow with a possible CBDC, which they are working on. The Federal Reserve has admitted they are working on CBDCs, and they sort of muddied the issue by saying that they were looking really hard at sort of wholesale CBDCs for transfers between banks, and that a retail CBDC was also something they're looking at. So it becomes kind of hard to distinguish between the wholesale CBDC and what they're doing with FedNow. But I think if they just would have called FedNow like Fed, ACH, Fed ACH 2.0, then nobody would have really batted an eye. There would have been some people saying, hey, this looks a little bit too much like what we're afraid of with the CBDC. But I think most people would just be super happy to have much faster payments with this FedNow system. And it's interesting here that they said what Jay Powell has been saying all along, and that's that they absolutely would not issue a retail CBDC without direct authorization from Congress. And they really want a law. They want Congress to pass a law saying the Fed can issue a CBDC. So here's what I think is interesting about this. Regardless of what the Fed says, trust is sort of at an all-time low. I mean, when I think about the low points of trust in the US government, we probably have to go back quite a ways. I mean, I don't know how far back we have to go. Maybe a hundred, maybe it's measured in centuries. Maybe we have to go back more than 100 years to find a point when trust in government was this low. And I don't have poll data to back that up, but just um, sort of thinking about what we're seeing in the world on social media, especially, there seems to be very, very low levels of trust in government. So no matter what the Fed says, there's still going to be a pretty strong embrace of this conspiracy theory that FedNow is just the beginning of the terrible dystopian CBDCs. I think this is actually good for crypto in general and for Cardano and other hard capped cryptocurrencies specifically. So, as unfortunate it is that this will probably be a function of low trust in government, at least in the US right now, the reality is that we are at this low point of trust. And because we are, the opponents of the current administration are going to run super hard at this conspiracy theory that you can't trust the government. And this is compounded by things like the Twitter files and all of the things that have been going on with suppression of free speech. You may not think there's suppression of free speech, but there's definitely a lot of people who do. And there's definitely a strong narrative that can be told about suppression of free speech recently. So all of these things together are going to lead to this sort of conspiracy narrative about FedNow. Maybe you think it's true, maybe you think it's conspiracy, doesn't really matter. Doesn't even matter if it's true or not. But there's going to be this strong narrative, and it's going to make an appearance in this election cycle because it is a presidential election cycle. The White House is at stake in this one. So there's going to be a lot of talk about FedNow and CBDCs, and the more political opponents talk about that issue, the more that's discussed, the more people, it's going to be this vicious cycle, I think, where people trust the federal government less and less on issues having to do with money. And people are going to talk about how much money has been printed over the last couple of years. So there's going to be less and less trust in the government to control the monetary supply. I think this is only going to add a little momentum to the crypto space. We're also coming into a Bitcoin halvening, which is scheduled for somewhere around 12 months from now. This is quite a bit of momentum behind crypto, and I think especially behind the hard capped cryptocurrencies, because a huge piece of the narrative you learn about when you first come to crypto is that Bitcoin is hard capped. And then you learn that Ethereum is not hard capped. And they're going to make all the rationalizations about how it's actually, the supply is actually deflationary because they've got the burning mechanism in place. They've got all these supply control mechanisms to argue that their supply, while it isn't hard capped, it is deflationary. That's a little bit too complicated for people. I think what people understand initially about crypto is this hard capped thing that distinguishes it from something like a central bank, where they just, famously inflate the supply of the money to debase the currency, which makes it easier to pay back debts and all of those kind of things we've discussed a million times on this channel. And they're going to find out that newcomers are going to find out that Ethereum is not hard capped, and they probably won't understand these arguments about why the burn mechanism makes it deflationary. But they'll know that Bitcoin is hard capped, and they'll find out that Cardano is hard capped. I think this whole thing, this taking of the political stage by this FedNow CBDC issue, I think this is actually going to be good for Cardano. Yesterday, we saw those great charts showing the very low levels of wallet control in Cardano, showing that Cardano was much more decentralized than something like an Ethereum. And today we see this great data. I can tell just by the formatting that this is from Cardano Blockchain Insights, which is a great place to find Cardano data. And sure enough, we see that the Nakamoto coefficient in Cardano has gone from a 24 in Epic 371, looks like here, to a 27 in Epic 393. This used to be something that we used to talk about and hotly debate all the time. Why was our Nakamoto coefficient so low? And for us, low at that time was something like, in the low 20s. I think it was even lower than 24 at one point. And now we've gone clear back up to 27, which is a truly excellent Nakamoto coefficient. When you look at the Nakamoto coefficients in something like a Bitcoin blockchain or an Ethereum that are in the single digits, we are much, much, much more decentralized than Bitcoin and Ethereum. Also, I've sort of known that this conversation was going to gain quite a bit of momentum. At some point in the bear market, we would reach a point when this conversation would start cropping up with a little bit more frequency. And I think we've kind of reached that point. This poster says, "Time for me to lose followers. I have a low opinion of NFTs and think it's just another outlet for short-term speculation that crypto loves to attract, similar to ICOs and governance tokens. 90% of crypto is driven by someone brainstorming newer ways to make some random token feel like it's worth something and letting get-rich-quick morons take it and run with it." And he specifies, to be clear, I'm talking about PFP style NFTs. And he made this in MS Paint to get the point across. I think you can imagine what that's trying to illustrate there. I think this is inevitable. I think every cycle there's going to be something kind of novel that comes along that sucks up a lot of the investment that takes a huge hit during the bear market. This has been sort of the story of crypto for a long, long time. There's always something. Last time it was ICOs, then we had a DeFi summer, and now here we are with NFTs. Finally, I won't even call this a rumor, but I will leave you with this. It may be some kind of a hint, or it may be a teaser, or maybe nothing at all. But Joshua Miller posted this. This is a black and white logo for the Epic Game Store. So if you're in Cardano, you can imagine if there is something going on here, if there's some kind of a partnership, if any number of Cardano games could possibly end up doing something with Epic Game Store, or if there were some kind of tokenization of something in the Epic Game Store via Cardano, anything like that, anything in that realm of possibilities, obviously would be something that everybody in Cardano would get excited for. So hopefully there's something here and this isn't just an empty teaser. But in any case, I hope you're having a great week and I'll talk to you tomorrow.